Welcome to the Genetec Tech Talk webinar on Best Security Practices for your Genetec software. My name is Derek. I'm a technical support representative with Genetec, and I'm going to be your host for today's presentation. What we're going to be looking at today are the best ways to secure your server and network, as well as your Genetec software. As with our previous Genetec Tech Talk webinars, we have members of the Genetec Technical Assistance Center standing by to answer your questions. Just type them into the GoToMeeting console and one of our Genetec members will reply with an answer shortly. If there are any questions we cannot get to in the time allotted, we'll be sure to send you an email with the answer. The questions and answers from previous webinars are hosted on the Genetec Technical Assistance Portal forums under the Genetec Tech Talk section. We're going to take about 25 minutes to go through the best security practices, and once we're done, I'll be going over some frequently asked questions for about another 10 minutes. We'll leave the webinar open for another few minutes after that in case anyone has any remaining questions they would like to ask. This webinar, as well as the previous Genetec Tech Talk webinars, will be hosted on the GTAP for future reference. Just click on Tools, go to Videos, and then click on the Webinars category on the left. Before we get into the specifics of the security practices that can be used to secure your system, I would like to just take a few minutes to give you a brief overview of what we're trying to accomplish here. As technology evolves, it's important to keep your security systems as secure as the assets that you are monitoring. Our goal is to protect our server and the applications on it from unauthorized access, but all the while maintaining a good flow of information to and from the server and the Genetec applications. The server and network entities that we'll be looking at to help better protect the system are the ports and firewalls, the antivirus software and storage devices, user accounts, SQL and service accounts, and the database backup. The Genetec Security Center and Omnicast applications provide many built-in options for security, which can be complemented by sound security practices applied to your server and network. The functions and entities that we will be looking at to help protect the Genetec software are the logical sites and partitions, the privileges and user groups, SSL encryption, video watermarking, retention periods, and entity protection. During the presentation, if you're unsure if we're looking at something that helps protect the server and network or the Genetec software, take a look at the top right corner of the screen and you'll either see the server and router icons or the Genetec software icons. The first subject to look into is the server and network security. Looking at our network access, we need to realize that leaving all the network ports open can expose the server to intrusion from external sources, so it's important to only leave open the ports that will be used by your applications. If you are complementing the network equipment firewall with the Windows firewall, make sure you exclude all the Genetec applications and processes. If we take a look at the next slide, we have a list of ports that need to be opened for the Synergis or Security Center applications to function properly. ICMP ping must also be enabled. For more information on the port usage, you can check out the diagrams for SST and HID network connections in the Security Center 4.0 Administrator Guide. The SST diagram can be found on page 375, and the HID diagram can be found on page 383. The Administrator Guide is included with the server software package, and can also be downloaded from the Documents section of the Genetec Technical Assistance portal. We will also have to make sure the ports are open for Omnicast. The list of default ports used by Omnicast are included in the chart you see here. The only set of ports that are not listed in the chart are the ones used to send unicast UDP streams from the archiver to the gateway. Ports 28,000 to 29,000 are used for that function. The ports you see here can also be found in the Default Communication Port Settings section of the Omnicast 4.6 Administrator Guide, starting on page 587. This guide can also be found in the Documents section of the GTAP, and is included with the software as well. Also related to our server security, we need to take a look at antivirus software and other issues related to the storage devices. While antivirus protection provides needed security to the server, it can also affect server performance and functionality of the Genetec applications. Scanning unnecessary folders can take up CPU resources, which may cause delays and lead to timeouts, units lost, client disconnections, and other unwanted behavior from the Genetec system. If you are running antivirus software on the server, please make sure to exclude the following list of folders. These are the base program file folders where the software is stored, the video archives folder where the archiver keeps the G64 video files, and as well we should include any folders where we are keeping our database files, logs, and services. This will help us avoid wasting a lot of time and CPU resources scanning the archive video files on a large hard drive when it's not needed. If you need to find out where the archiver is storing the video files or where the logs are being written to, you can open the Server Admin application and check the Archiving tab of the Archiving service, and also the Logging tabs for all of these services. Related to this, we need to make sure we have the Windows Indexing service disabled for all drives that are being archived to. The indexing service runs in the background and scans hard drives to create indexes of the contents and properties of the files and folders on the drive. As with the antivirus software, it would be a waste of CPU resources to check the video archives since they will not be searched within Windows. There's one other thing I'd like to mention for these storage devices, which is related to the efficiency of the system. When partitioning the drives on the storage devices, it is a good idea to keep the partition size to around 4 to 8 terabytes maximum. Anything above that, and our searching and writing time starts to increase. This is of course dependent on the strength of the system as well, so lower partition size values may be required for an older system. When we're considering the accounts that we're using on the server, we need to take a look at the user accounts and the SQL accounts. Please note that we are still talking about the accounts in Windows, and not referring to the Omnicast or Security Center user accounts. For software installation, we need to use an administrator account, but this is the only time we need to log in as an administrator. Access to the administrator accounts should be limited to selected personnel. Standard users of the client applications need to have read-write privileges for the following folders. The first is the folder from which the software is running, such as the Genetec Security Center 4.0 folder, which can be found on the C drive in the Program Files folder. The second folder is the Application Data folder that can be found on the C drive under Documents and Settings and All Users. Depending on the version of Windows installed, this may be the Program Data folder right off the root of the C drive as well. We're using the C drive by default, but if the drive was changed in the installation process, you'll need to adjust your settings accordingly when granting access. The last place where the standard Windows user needs to have read-write access is the Genetec section of the registry. This can be found by going to HKey Local Machine, under Software, and then the Genetec folder. If the machine is running a 64-bit edition of Windows, there may also be a WoW 6432 node folder right before the Genetec folder. Now let's take a look at the service user, which is the account used by the services to log into the system, and how this relates to SQL. We need to make sure the service user account has administrator rights to the SQL databases, particularly in cases where the databases are not installed on the same machine as the server. For Security Center, the services log in using the local system user by default. Instead of using the local account, we recommend setting up a service user that has the same SQL database administrator rights. If you're using SQL Server 2008, you'll need to set up the user manually. We have a knowledge base article that outlines how to do this, and is also included in the installation and upgrade guide. The knowledge base article is number 320 and can be found in the Genetec Technical Assistance portal. By default, Omnicast creates the Omnicast service user, which is added to the Windows Administrator group. The Omnicast services are set up to log in using the Omnicast service user account, but another account may be used provided it has sufficient rights. The service accounts that used need to maintain local administrator rights, and the account can be changed in the service properties. You can get to the properties by right-clicking on the service and selecting Properties. Now, if you're using the Omnicast service user account, please make sure to change the password. The default password can be obtained by contacting the Genetec Technical Assistance Center. Once the password has been changed, don't forget to update the password field in the service properties as well. The service user account can be assigned to be a domain user. It needs to maintain the same rights required by the local administrator and needs to be added as an administrator for the SQL databases as well. One other requirement for the service user account is that it must have read and write permission to all storage space, such as hard drives, NAS or network attached storage devices, and SAN or storage area network devices. One last thing to mention with respect to the databases is that it's always a good idea to use the database backup option. The best practice in this case would be to save the files on a drive or system that is not the same as the one being used by SQL to store the databases. This way, you'll have a backup if the drive goes, and barring some kind of catastrophic event, it's unlikely that both drives will go at the same time. The Security Center comes with a built-in single-click backup function, and you can also schedule when to do the backup. You can do this from the Directory and Access Manager database tabs, under the Backup section. You just need to set the time and frequency of the backup, and you can also select how many generations of backup files to keep. Also, don't forget to set the backup location as well. This will back up the databases, but will not do the registry, since the registry typically does not change very much after the initial installation. After the server has been fully set up and configured, we recommend doing a manual backup by clicking on the Backup button under the Backup folder location. The manual backup will make a backup of your registry items as well as the database. For Omnicast, the database backup can be done using the Omni Backup executable. You can either run this from the command prompt manually or set this up as a scheduled Windows task to run on whatever frequency you wish. The Omni Backup tool can be found in the Genetec Technical Assistance portal by selecting Tools, clicking on Utilities, and expanding the Genetec Tools section. The zip file contains the release notes which go into detail on the different parameters you can use to run the backup. The very basic backup command, which will back up all the databases and the registry, is displayed here. If you need more assistance setting up the backup, please give the Genetec Technical Assistance Center a call. Now that we've had a look at the server and network security, let's take a closer look at the Genetec applications and how we can keep them more secure. Both Omnicast and Security Center offer a logical subdivision of entities. In Omnicast, we use sites, and in Security Center, it's called partitions. Both of these allow you to decide which users or user groups can view each entity that has been allocated to the system. The users who have not been assigned to the site or partition cannot monitor events or view video related to the entities in that site. This allows administrators to maintain privacy and block confidential information from users who do not have permission to view it. To set up sites in Omnicast, you first need to create the sites from the logical view of the config tool. Then you can assign your entities to the site by dragging and dropping them into the site, again from the logical view. Now we need to go into the User Management section, where we can either assign an individual user permission to a site or multiple sites using the Permissions tab, or we can assign the user to a group and give the group access to a site or multiple sites, again using the Permissions tab. Now if that particular user logs in, the only site available will be the one that we have assigned to them, with the entities we have assigned to that site. In our example, we have given the operator users group access to the operator's site. We can set up hidden sites as well, which are only viewable by members of the administrator's group. This is set up in the logical view under the site's accepted users. We just need to click on the Hidden Site checkbox down the bottom here. In Security Center, we can set up partitions and assign each entity to their own partition, and then restrict user access to a particular partition in much the same way. First, we need to make sure we have our partitions set up. We can do this by going to the Security section and choosing Partitions. The next step is to assign some entities to that partition. This is done by clicking on the entity in the logical view, and then clicking on the Partitions section in the Relationships, and then adding the partition. We can also do this by going to the Members section of the partition, and adding members from a list of all entities. The Control and Shift keys can be used to select multiple entities to add at one time. We can add the users and user groups from here, or we can go into the Accepted Users section of the partition and add any users and user groups that we wish to have access to the entities that have been assigned to that partition. After that, the only entities that will be visible to users that have access to the partition are the ones that have been assigned to the partition. The next topic I would like to cover for the Genetec software security is concerning privileges and user groups. Omnicast and Security Center both have an extensive list of configurable privileges that can be assigned to each user or user group. At the end of this section, we're going to take a look at this particular job type that we have laid out here and see how that's being applied to the privileges. Now, we recommend giving rights at the group level and then assigning users to groups instead of assigning privileges to individual users unless specifically needed. Unless a right is explicitly given or inherited from a group, a user will not be able to perform a task or have access to an application. This means that if you have a privilege that has been set to undefined, it will be treated as a denial unless the user is assigned to a group that has this privilege set to allow. We can use privileges to ensure users monitor exactly what is wanted and are not able to change the settings of any entities or even log off if desired. This is useful for preventing overwriting or accidental deletion of settings and for enforcing operational protocols. In terms of the priority given to the privileges, a deny will always outweigh an allow. So if we have a user who has been assigned to two user groups, and in one user group the user is allowed access to the config tool, but in the second user group they are denied access, then the deny will take precedence and they will not be allowed access to the config tool. So let's take a look back at our example of the privilege setup. If we take a look at the operator users group that we have set up in Omnicast, we can see that the users assigned to this group will only have access to the live viewer and the archive player. They do not have access to the config tool. Also, in the live viewer, they cannot change the display, but they can start and stop a guard tour. They may also acknowledge alarms, but they are not allowed to snooze them. This would be set up according to our company policy for operators and the functions we want to allow them to do, and what we would not permit them from doing. The next subject I would like to discuss is SSL encryption, which can prevent data in transit from being read by outside sources. This can be used in all communication done in Security Center between the server and the units, and can be enabled in the server admin by clicking on the directory service, going to the directory tab, and then putting a check mark on the box next to Secure Communications. Please note that the video being imported from Omnicast is not encrypted. However, within Omnicast, communication with units using the Variant extension can benefit from SSL encryption. Omnicast provides another benefit in keeping your video secure in the form of video watermarking. This is not a watermark in the traditional sense. The video image is not modified in any way, but is a digital watermark. Basically, a digital signature is added to each recorded frame, which can be verified later for authenticity. This allows users to confirm that a video file in the Genetec G64 format has not been tampered with. This can be verified by going into the archive player and searching for a file in the file browser mode. Under the status, you will see if the file has been watermarked, and if so, if it's been tampered with or if it has been authenticated. If you export video in any other format but the G64 format, the watermarking will not be transferred. The video watermarking is less about protecting your video, but more about proving your video has been protected and has not been modified. This is very important in law enforcement and courtroom environments. To enable video watermarking, go into the server admin, click on the archiver service, and then go into the security tab. From here, you can click on the video watermarking checkbox. Since there are some calculations involved, there will be an increase in the CPU load for any archiver that is doing video watermarking. The increase in CPU usage may be up to around 30%, however there is very little increase in the size of the recorded video. Another thing we need to check, which again is more proof of security and system efficiency, are the retention periods set up for various elements of the system. The first thing to check is the retention length of the video files. This is basically how long they will be kept on the archiver before they are deleted, providing it has the space. Next, we should take a look at the logs for all services. As mentioned in the antivirus section, we can get there by opening the server admin, clicking on the service, and then going to the logging tab. We should be keeping the logs for at least as much time as we're keeping the video files. So the number of days to keep the logs should be equal to or higher than the video retention length. On the flip side of this is the alarm database retention period. We should only be keeping alarms for the same amount of time as we're keeping the video files. Anything more than that is not useful since we don't have the video files to investigate the alarms, and it's just overloading the system. You can check the alarm retention period in Omnicast by opening the server admin, clicking on the directory service, and from the General tab, look under the Alarm Database section. You can change how long to keep the alarm history from there. Now the last section I'd like to take a look at today is on entity protection. Most of the units that are added to Omnicast or Security Center, such as cameras or access controllers, come with factory default credentials. Although it's easy to add the units using the default username and password associated with a brand of equipment, it leaves the units vulnerable to anyone who knows the default credentials and has access to an internet browser within the network. As with any default password on the system, make sure you change the default passwords on your units as well. Just be sure to keep the passwords in a safe place so you have access to them when you need them. So this concludes our presentation on best security practices, but if you'd like to stick around for a few minutes, I'm going to go over some frequently asked questions. And the first question is concerning SQL. Should I use SQL mixed mode authentication? Creating SQL-specific users can help partition your database roles more easily. However, if more than Omnicast databases are present, make sure to isolate the rights of each user, as it creates more ways to access the database. Our second question: can I disable the Windows firewall if there's another firewall present or the system is on a secure network? Normally, there would not be an issue disabling the Windows firewall service if the system is protected. However, we have seen an issue in the Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2, where disabling the firewall cuts off other network communication on the server. The solution is to leave the Windows firewall service enabled, but go into the control panel and turn off the Windows firewall protection from there. And our third question: how can I find out the default password for my encoder, IP camera, or access controller? The default passwords are usually included in the manuals that come with the equipment, but if it is not listed there or the manuals are not available, you can also call the manufacturer and they will be able to provide this information. Question number 4. Do I need to change the default ports in Omnicast or Security Center? Now, normally the default ports are pretty well configured, so you should not need to change them unless there's a specific reason to do so. The only exception are the gateway ports for a system with multiple gateways, where each gateway should be assigned its own range. You can see an example of this in the Directory Failover Installation and Configuration Guide. This concludes our presentation on the best security practices. On behalf of myself and the Genetec Technical Assistance Center, I'd like to thank you all very much for attending and wish you a very good day.